hirubi bat irratia honetan beste gonbidatu bat daukagu. Iruditzen zait gainera oso gonbidatu interesgarria izango dela. Izan ere Jarret du gurekin, erresuma batotik datorren artista, eta berak, nik uste dut jente askorentzat interesgarria izango den gai bat dakarkigula. Berak slam poetry deituriko egiten du, slam poesia edo hitzesko poesia. Eta hemen improvisazioari eta hitzesko ahozko kulturari buruz badakigunen zerbait, berarekin ere komentatuko dugu. I was just telling Keith that you're going to present something here that I think that for most people can be very interesting, as you're going to talk about slam poetry. Maybe some people don't know what exactly it is, but I'm sure that when you explain it or afterwards at 8 o'clock in the afternoon, isn't it, when you're doing your show, people will see what it is and will say, okay, we have something like that, like Bertolari's here, who do improvisation. So to begin with, how would you describe what you do? I mean, slam poetry is not a very common artistic thing here. How would you describe what you do?
Slam poetry is only a part of what I do. Slams themselves are competitions. So tonight I'm not going to do a slam competition. I think sometimes people use the word slam as a shorthand for spoken word poetry, and spoken word poetry is really poetry that is live, that is performed, where the person who has written the poem performs their own words, and so it sort of brings it to life in a different way than simply just reading from a piece of paper. So that's what for me performance poetry is. Slam poetry again is about democratizing poetry a bit more, so you can have, like in any given slam, usually, unless it's a national competition, usually anyone can sign up on the night and say, okay, I want my 3-minute spot. Slams usually are very short things, because every poet has 3 minutes to perform what they have to say, and so that's what makes it lively, what sort of brings life to poetry again. I've been to some poetry nights which are very serious, very formal, and you'll have someone reading, the whole book for an hour, and you fall asleep. But slam is about sort of giving it some energy, I guess.
Keith, I don't know if you have had the opportunity to watch or to listen a Bertolari competition too. And if, in case of yes, what do you think about it? To listen something like your work in another language?
I watched a film about Bertolari's, and I'd not heard of this before. I think it's a really interesting, rich tradition that is here, and it's similar in many ways, but it's also very different. I mean, I don't improvise, for one, and that's something that I'm actually quite envious of, people who improvise and do something really phenomenal. So yeah, I want to find out more about it, and unfortunately I won't be able to. I know there's a Bertolari who's going to be performing tomorrow, and unfortunately I'm not going to be here to see it, so I'm kicking myself that I will miss it, but it's something that really interests me, that there is a culture already here of performing poetry and again bringing it to life, so it's not just dead on a page. So I really find that interesting.
However, I think that the physical language that Bertolari uses is much more or less interesting and work than the one that you use, because I suppose that as your texts are written and you're reading them, the most important thing will be maybe not the text but how you say it.
I'd say a mixture of both. Of course, like, because I have the opportunity, I'm not improvising, so I have the opportunity to edit what I say, to make it more concise, to think about how I'm playing with the words. But also I do think about how I perform, because you can use space, you can pause, you can go silent, you can increase your volume, you can do loads of different things with your voice, and let alone with your body, how you stand, how you use your facial expressions. All of that I have at my disposition when I'm performing. So I see myself as part of the poem. Whenever I read a poem, it brings me back to when I wrote it. When I write something, a lot of poems I've written, I wrote about feeling a certain way, and I don't feel that now. And so when I recite the poem, I'm going back to that moment usually. So that's the great thing about Versalades. They're in the moment, and I'm not. I have to sort of go back to it.
Yeah, you usually or always you write your own words, isn't it? What themes do you like to write about? I mean, what are your favorite themes?
I've been asked this question a couple of times, and I always say something different. I don't know, whatever is on my mind at the moment, whatever I am struggling to understand, and yeah, like I don't think there's one particular theme that unites everything that I've written. At the moment I'm writing a lot more about my family, but maybe next week I'll be writing about the elections. I don't know. I like to write about people, and not so much about nature, but apart from that there's nothing that is off limits or anything.
But you use your words like social protest. I mean, sometimes it's like social discussion, things that are in the society, things that you think about them, and you think that you have to talk about that because it's your own.
Yeah, I mean, I have opinions on what's going on around me, and I do write about social issues. But I made a decision recently not to preach. I grew up in a very religious background, and it's not my job anymore to preach. But through describing my world poetically, I have had people say, I've looked at something in a different way. So yeah, of course I talk about social issues, but I'm very careful to make sure that it's poetic. My primary interest is using language to explore things, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm playing with language while also exploring these themes. I'm not writing specifically, okay, I'm going to write a poem about this. Usually what will happen is I have something that is on my mind that's going around, and maybe I do want to explore something, but at the same time I'm challenging myself so it's a mixture. I don't believe that you can be apolitical. I don't believe that anything is neutral. People who say, art for art's sake, they're lying to themselves. There's no such thing as something that is neutral. I have my positions, I have the way that I see things, and even if I'm writing about a bottle of water, that will come out without me having to force that out. That's where I stand on that.
I am curious too about your capacity to learn to other people. The way you use the language, the way you use the musicality of your voice. I don't know if you have worked in a pedagogical way, exactly like that.
In that sense, it's very interesting that you're doing a workshop now with local students. How do you feel like teaching?
I was extremely nervous, so I started on Tuesday, and so it was workshops, 2 workshops which lasted till today, and it was the first time that I taught poetry in Spanish. And so yeah, I was very nervous beforehand, but I have taught in London. I'm part of a program called Spoken Word Educators in London, and so I'm used to working in school and working with young people. They always have something new and something different to bring, which I find really interesting. Doing it in Spanish, I had to get used to saying certain words in Spanish, which by today they came back to me and I was fine. And they seemed to respond well. A lot of them said they'd never written before. Some of them said they'd only ever written in the Basque language. And I got them working in groups, so they did group poetry. Because again, this is something that isn't done often enough. You know, writing doesn't have to be a solitary exercise. When you have 3 people writing a poem and performing the poem, you can do like 9 times as many things as you can as one person. And it was exciting in the end. I was worried. I thought because the first group on the first day, they were very quiet, they were nervous, they were shy. But today they were like, yep, we're gonna do this, and they produced some really interesting work. So yeah, like I really enjoyed it.
And how did you see their capacity to talk in public, to use their physical language? Because I would say that here in our since we're children, since we finish university studies, we're not taught really talking in public. It's not very taken into account in our culture too. That sense of public, oral expression. How did you see that?
I mean, there's 2 things. One, I mean, the same in the UK. It's not a subject. People aren't taught. It's not part of the curriculum. Okay, now we're going to do public speaking, and something that I've told children that I've taught is, look, at some point in your life, you are going to have to speak in public. It could be that it could be really great. You could be at a wedding and giving a speech. It could be a funeral, you know, giving a speech. It could be that you're going to become a famous footballer. Some people, you know, sometimes when I'm teaching at school with kids, with boys especially, they're like, why do we do poetry? I want to be a footballer. And it's like, you're going to be a footballer, they're going to come and interview you, and you need to be able to present yourself. So yes, we're going to do poetry and you're going to learn how to present yourself. And that sometimes works. But yeah, like it's something that isn't valued, isn't taught, because we still have these old-fashioned written exams. But I don't know about you, but as an adult, I've never been told to sit in a room for 2 hours and write by hand. It's not really important for life to do these exams, whereas actually, as an adult, I do have to speak a lot in public, and that's very important. But yeah, on the other hand, the second thing is when you're dealing with teenagers, particularly I'd say like between 11 and 14, they're like very, very, very shy, some of them, you know, because they're self-conscious, they're changing. You know, as kids, they're not very self-conscious, they'll say anything, do anything. But when they get to that age, suddenly, you know, they don't want to look stupid in front of their peers. And so getting them to speak publicly is a challenge, but it's one that I enjoy. And so that's why working in groups makes it easier.
Okay, so thank you very much, Keith. Thank you. From our part, it's not our responsibility, but also we would like to thank publicly for giving those local students the opportunity to learn more about poetry, about spoken poetry. And let's hope that the show tonight will be okay, great. let's hope that people will enjoy it, and maybe afterwards public here will also have more will be more conscious about that art. And I would say that, for example, we could see that in YouTube, isn't it? There's a lot of spoken poetry on the internet, and it's very interesting. I've watched some videos, and it's really, really interesting. So, yeah, let's take a look at your show. Let's enjoy it, and let's hope that in the future this art will also be more present here in the Basque Country.
I hope so. Thank you very much.